Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the slightly delayed Sunday Night Live for December 5th or December 4th, whichever part of the world you're in. Here in Scotland, it's already December 5th, so we are already well into December, which is a little bit crazy. But anyway, I hope everybody is doing well and has had a good week. I've had a very busy weekend. In particular, today I've been up since 6 o'clock this morning and it is now midnight, so I've been on the go for like 18 hours today, which is a little bit crazy, but I'm hanging in there. I'm kind of still awake, which is good. But yeah, so we have a question to start off with, which is more of a notation question, so we are definitely going to tackle that, and I'm going to show you how you can, what you need to do to tell a musician to play a harmonic, whether a natural harmonic or an artificial harmonic, and it depends upon what note you actually input into the score to tell the musician what they need to play. So yeah, it's fairly straightforward in Notion 6, so I'm going to show you how to do that. But yeah, hang on just a second. I have some kind of audio issue that I'm being warned about. Okay, I'm just going to ignore it because I think everything is fine. Anyway, I hope everybody is doing well. I'm going to go see who is here, and I think Billy was first in the door as per normal, because he's always first in the door. Billy's always here first before everybody else, so good for you, Billy. Let's see who else is here. We got Keith, we got Kyle, we've got Kevin, and we got Mike at Music to Motion, and we got Just Bob as well, who asked the first question. We'll get to the question in just a moment. And we got Don Oliver, we got Charlie Dillon here, we got Paul Morgan, and we got the Anonymous Housewife as well. And we got Rich at My Personas, and who else do we have? We got the W5 family, and Shorty Beard is here, which is awesome. And who else do we have? We got Night Writer, which I think is a new person to the show. Welcome to you. Glad you're here. I hope you enjoy the show. If you want to ask a question, please do get it into the chat, and I will be glad to help you out. But please do, and this goes for anybody, before you ask a question, as you'll see a few people have so far, if you type at Jonny Lipsham Studios at the start of the question, what that does is that to me highlights my name in red, which means that is a question. Okay? And that just means that I'm not having to try and find your questions, search for your questions amongst the chat. Just makes it a bit easier. So I would appreciate it if you were to do that. It would help me a lot. And it would mean that I can find your questions without you having to retype them, which would be good for you guys. So the other thing to do is that you'll find in the description box below, you'll find a link to my PayPal. If you enjoy what I do here and you would like to make a small contribution, a small donation, you are free and welcome to do so, and I would appreciate it a lot. If you don't want to, that's fine too. This is a free show. I don't charge anything for it. I don't charge anything for any of my videos or for any content that is on this channel. It's just a choice I have made. There are some people that monetize their channels. I used to monetize my channel, but with changes to how YouTube do things, I decided that I was not going to do that anymore. So if you enjoyed kind of making those donations, you still can. You just need to use the PayPal link that's in the description below. But other than that, that's it. There's no obligations at all upon anybody. Alright, so we got, let's see, we've got 18 people watching and we got 10 likes. So if you would be so kind as to hit the like button, I would appreciate it. If you want to engage in the chat, then please do subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell and select all notifications so you don't miss anything that I do on this channel. That includes my Sunday Night Live show. Occasionally I host Songwriting Simplified here, and I also make just standalone videos as well. So if you want to see all of that stuff, then please subscribe and hit that notification bell. But yeah, you won't be able to engage in the chat until you've been subscribed for at least 10 minutes. So once you've subscribed, you gotta wait 10 minutes and then you can ask your question, or you can say hello. Saying hello is just as good. Alright, so now we've got all of that out of the way. We've actually got a couple of questions now, which is great. John Hawk is here as well, which is great. And Secret Squirrel has just joined us as well. Cool. Alright, let's go take a look at this question. And Anonymous Housewife has a question as well, which I'm going to get to as well. So yeah, whilst I'm looking at these questions, please do get your questions in the chat. Alright, so the first question of the evening, which, by the way, if you are the first person to ask a question, you get your question pinned to the top of the chat so that everybody can see it and nobody misses it. So let's go take a look at that question. Just Bob says, how would you write harmonics in musical notation? For example, guitar harmonics or any stringed instrument, such as violin harmonics, that kind of thing. Okay, there is a little symbol that has to go over the top of the note head. And it looks like a tiny little zero. And that goes over the top of the note head. And that tells them the performer that they need to play that as a harmonic, either on their string instrument with the bow, or by playing it on the guitar. There's different techniques to how you create harmonics on different instruments. So with a bowed instrument, you draw the bow across the string as you normally would, whilst you are lightly touching the string with your finger at a certain point on the fingerboard, and that creates harmonics. Basically what that does is, instead of playing the fundamental tone, the fundamental note, by lightly touching the string, you are killing the fundamental tone and allowing access to the harmonic overtones of that fundamental note, which is very, very cool. And it means you can play lots of really, really high-pitched sounds. And it can be really, really decorative and very, very colorful. There are some great guitar players that do this extremely well. Tommy Emmanuel is one who can basically just play a cascade of these harmonics on the guitar. How he does it, I'm not really sure how he does it, but it's amazing to listen to him do it. Jaco Pastorius in Portrait of Tracy did it on fretless electric bass guitar. He was famous for doing a little cascade of harmonics. Again, I mean, I play fretless bass and I still haven't quite figured out how he does them so fast, but he does them, and it's amazing. So let's get into notation so that we can check this out. Alright, so let's go over to Notion 6. This is Notion 6.8.2, which is the current build of Notion. And I've got an acoustic guitar here, and as you can see, I've got two E's, and then I've got this little circle above each note head. And the way you access those is from this part of the palette here, where you've got the up arpeggio and the trill. And then that gives you access to all of these extra things. So you've got all of these extra symbols. You've got different types of trill. You've got a glissando, you've got portamento. Pedal up, pedal down is not really going to bother you because you don't have a pedal on an acoustic guitar. Neither are the up and down bowing instructions going to bother you. But what we want is we want these ones here. This one is called open harmonic, and you can also have closed as well. So if you kind of want to kind of alternate between a dead sound and a harmonic, you can do that by alternating these two symbols. So first thing you have to do is you have to put in your note. So let's go and do that. Let's maybe put in an A, and then what we'll do is we'll go over to the palette here and we'll select the open harmonic tool, and we'll just park it on the top just like that. And then we can go and grab another note, and we can do the octave below that just for fun, and then we do another note over the top. And that's basically how you write harmonics. So now your performer is going to know that when they see these notes, they need to be performed as harmonics. So harmonics work really well on open strings, although you can fret and harmonic by fretting a note, and then with your pinky you can rest your finger over the position that you want to generate the harmonic and then strike the string with a plectrum or with your finger to create the harmonic. So and the same would be the case with a violin. So you would put your finger on the string, pushing fully down on the string, and then with your little finger you then rest your little finger lightly on the string to create the harmonic. And that way you can get other harmonic tones and those are more kind of the artificial kind of harmonics rather than natural open harmonics from open strings. So there are different points on a string, for those of you who don't know, where harmonics are really, really clear and bell-like, and some where they're not quite so clear. But if you want to open up different tones, different pitches, then yeah, you can fret by pressing down on the guitar string, and then with your little finger rest it lightly over that string, and you'll get a harmonic. You might need to pluck the string really quite hard, or bow the string really quite hard, to get the kind of attack and the kind of volume that you want. But it will work. It will work well. All right, so there you go. So that's how you can enter harmonics. It's very, very cool. Let's see, do we have any other questions after that one? Yes, we do. We have Anonymous Housewife's question. What is Presonus Hub and why would one use it? Presonus Hub is basically a little application by which you can install some Presonus plugins into a third-party DAW. For example, Ableton Live, or Pro Tools, or Cubase. Let's say you want to use Ampire in Cubase. You can. If you have purchased Ampire as its own plugin, so not just the Ampire that comes inside of Studio One, but you purchase Ampire itself, and then you download and install Presonus Hub, and then you install Ampire into the hub, and then what you can do is you can then install all of that into Cubase, and Cubase will see it, and then you can use Ampire inside of Cubase. Works pretty well. Some people have a little bit of trouble with it. Presonus Hub can on occasion be a little bit finicky with certain DAWs, but for the most part it works pretty well. But yeah, that's what Presonus Hub is for. I have it because I occasionally want to use some Presonus plugins, like the analog delay inside of Ableton Live. I don't use Ableton Live very much, but there are occasions when I do use it. As you'll see, or you have seen from my my taskbar at the bottom of my screen, I do have Ableton Live installed. So yeah, so if I want to use a Presonus plugin in a third-party DAW, that's what Presonus Hub is all about. It enables that to happen. It's like the Waves Central. You know how you have, if you have Waves plugins, you have an installer, an application called Waves Central, and you basically load all of your Waves plugins into this application called Waves Central, and then from there the plugins work inside of the DAW. And that's kind of what Presonus Hub is. It's a little bit like the Plugin Alliance install. I forget what the Plugin Alliance thing is called. I do have Plugin Alliance plugins as well, so I should know. What's it called? It's unimaginatively called the Plugin Alliance Installation Manager. There you go. That's what it's called. Not anything funky, but there are different softwares that have different things. Different plugin manufacturers have like a different way of installing their plugins into your DAW. And so Presonus Hub is just our way of using, of enabling you to install Presonus plugins that ordinarily would only work in Studio One. We now make them as VST3s, so you can install them, and AU and I think AAX. Not 100% sure about AAX, but certainly VST3 in AU, and I think VST2 as well, so that you can use them in a third-party DAW. So that is the answer to that question. So if you're not using a third-party DAW, then you won't need it. Let's see, Secret Squirrel says, taking my first stab at setting up some orchestral stuff and trying to load a template provided by a company called Divisimate, but it shows a list of missing devices. Advice. Well, I don't actually have what you're talking about there. I don't have any templates from Divisimate at all. However, most of the time, I kind of went most because I was going to say two different words, and I ended up going with most. Most of the time, if you get a missing devices error, it's because either the song that you have imported into Studio One has a bunch of sounds or plugins that you don't have installed on your computer. So if you don't have whatever is in this template, then you're going to get a bunch of missing devices errors, because Studio One is going to look for what is in the template. It's going to look for plugins, it's going to look for virtual instruments, it's going to look for whatever is loaded into that template. And if that happens to be orchestral sounds from a certain orchestral sound library, if you do not have that sound library installed and those sounds installed, then Studio One's not going to find them, and it'll go, these things are missing. You need to either find them or install them. And so that's really the answer. That's really the solution to the problem, is make sure you've got those things installed. So that kind of deals with that, with templates. Sometimes somebody will say, hey, here is a template for all kinds of DAWs. I see this happen all the time. Content creators, they say, hey, get my free template for your DAW. And you go, oh, great, free mixing template. Great, it's gonna help me mix really, really quickly. It's gonna help me, kind of skip over some things and some routing that maybe I don't want to have to spend time doing. So you get the template, you install the template into Studio One, and then you open a new song with this template, and you get a whole bunch of missing devices errors. Might well be because the template's not been configured correctly, if it's using just native plugins from Studio One, or if it's got some third-party plugins, or it was designed with a different interface being used, so maybe the input and output routing is not the same as what you have, then that might create some issues, and certainly you might get missing devices errors. So if it's opening something that, let's say you got an orchestral template that uses Persona Symphonic Orchestra. If you don't have that particular add-on for Studio One, then you're just going to get missing devices errors for Presence XT, because Persona Symphonic Orchestra is an add-on for Presence XT. So if you don't have those, then it's not going to find them. So I hope that answers your question there. It's a good one, and a lot of people fall foul of that one. Let's see. Since notation is a big subject as of late. Yeah, notation is cool. I'm assuming that that's related to something else you were talking about then. Because Bob says, thanks, I guess I always assumed that was the whole note symbol. Kind of similar, but not the same. Yeah, it's not quite the same. Anonymous Housewife says, okay, that's nice. I just got an older DAW reinstalled from a lost computer. Okay, cool. Wasn't Rewire used for this too? Not quite. Rewire is a slightly different thing. Rewire basically allows you to use another sound library from another program and have it work inside of Studio One, for example. For example, the Notion sounds. The Notion sounds from Notion 6 are in their own file format, so they won't work in Studio One. However, You used to be able to, until Rewire was discontinued, you used to be able to use Rewire to basically rewire Notion into Studio One so that you could use the sound library from Notion inside of Studio One. You can't do that anymore. And likewise, you could reverse the flow so that you could have presence and things like that from Studio One working inside of Notion. You can't do that anymore because Rewire was discontinued, and Studio One does not even install with Rewire anymore. We pulled it completely from the program because Reason Studios, formerly known as Propellerhead, who developed this little Rewire thing, they discontinued it back in 2020, and it's not coming back. And pretty much every DAW on the planet no longer has it built into it. So so yeah, so Rewire's a slightly different thing. So yeah. But yeah, Rewire was a cool little application. John Hawk says, I know you touched on this already, but how do I install sound sets on an external drive and get Studio One to read them? Well, you got to make sure that you have the sound set path on your external drive mapped inside Studio One. So you would do this in Studio One options or Studio One preferences and sound sets. So you go locations, sound sets, and then you need to make sure that your path is added to that. For example, here I have my external drive here, my D drive. It's not an external drive, it's my secondary internal drive. And I've got a sound sets folder there because some of my stuff is on that drive. Most of it I put on my C drive because I have plenty of storage space on my C drive. Eventually, I will run out of that storage space. And when that happens, I will use one of my other external drives. I've got a 4 terabyte external drive. It maybe isn't the fastest drive on the planet, so maybe I won't be using it, but I can invest in another one that is either an SSD or a 7200 RPM spinning mechanical drive. You got to make sure that the location for those sound sets is mapped here, and then you got to make sure that Studio One is going to scan that location. Once you've got it here and you hit apply and OK, then you can go to this little home tab here. Let's cancel out that. You can go to this home tab here. You can re-index presets and all of that fun stuff. That's mostly for plugins, but it will also re-index the presets for things like Presence and Mai Tai and Mojito and things like that. And then what that will do is that will just make Studio One go through its scanning process of all of its sound sets. And it will scan that location that you've got set up in options, locations, sound sets, or preferences, locations, sound sets, depending upon whether you're on a Mac or a PC. All right, so yeah, got to make sure that the path for where they are located on whether it's an external hard drive or an internal hard drive, wherever it is, make sure that it is listed here. That's the first thing to do. Second thing to do, make sure if it is a USB external drive that you have all hibernation modes turned off on your computer. And I mean all of them, especially the ones that will make a USB hard drive go to sleep when it's not in use. That happens, Studio One is not going to see that location anymore. And it might even cause Studio One to freeze because it's attempting to reference that location, and if it can no longer reference that location, then the song may well completely crash altogether. So you've got to make sure that you have no sleep modes and no hibernation modes and no parking on your computer. You can do that in your computer's operating system optimization. So be that Mac or PC, make sure all of those things are turned off. Make sure it's either a 7200 RPM spinning drive, or better yet, make sure it isn't a solid state drive. Because you want the fastest possible reading and writing time. All right, so I hope that answers that question. And as Just Bob says here, please tap that like button. It is incredibly helpful when you do so. It is incredibly helpful when you hit the like button, because the YouTube algorithm goes, hey, folks are liking this video. This video must be good. Therefore, we shall promote it. And sometimes some of my videos and some of my live streams have actually ended up on the YouTube homepage. And when they get onto the YouTube homepage, that's where most people are going to go, and they're going to see things that are on the homepage, and they are going to click on those, just, you know, as a first choice. Six Scroll says, interesting, all of the VSTs which they are missing seem to be here. I'm totally perplexed. I'll have to reach out to them. Thank you for answering. Yes, I think you probably will. I wonder if there's a difference between VST2 and VST3. It might well be. Maybe the template has different versions of the same VSTs. That is also a good possibility. Just Bob says, notation reads your MIDI notes and creates a song sheet, correct? If that's the case, can you import a notation sheet, create MIDI notes from it, for example, in your song page? Alright, so here's a cool little thing about what you can do in Notion. Now, it is possible to take sheet music from a sheet music vendor, and you can bring that into Notion, and you can use the Notion sound library to play that sheet music. However, it's not like a straight one-to-one thing. You need to use a third-party application called ScanScore, which you can get from scanscore.com, and what that does is that will scan that document, that PDF document that you get from, you know, sheet music vendors, and it will convert it into a Notion file format, and then you can open that up right away inside of Notion. So let's say, you know, you download Herbie Hancock's piano solo for My Funny Valentine, which, by the way, is an absolutely gorgeous piano solo, and I recommend everybody listen to it. But let's say you purchase this and you want to do an arrangement of it in Notion. So you want to have Herbie's piano solo, but you want to have upright bass and some drums accompaniments, and maybe you want to add some strings to it, or whatever you want to do. And you want to do all of that in Notion. So the first thing you've got to do is you've got to get the piano score from the PDF into ScanScore, and then you can convert it in ScanScore into a music XML file, which can be opened in Notion. And then you just assign the sound. So you just assign the piano sound to the piano, and then you can add whatever instrumentation you want to it after that. So that will work. The other thing you can do, if you want to send something from Studio One to Notion, there is this Send to Notion feature. So if I had, do I have something? Let me go to my start page. Let's see, do I have anything that I can send? Yes, I do. I'm going to close that right now. And I'm going to go back to Studio One. Let's see, do I have anything here? Yes, I do. I have this piano part. Alright, so this piano part's got a bunch of MIDI chords in it. So let's say I want to send just this guy to Notion. I can do that. What I can do is I can go Song, Send to Notion, and I can send note data of this selected track. Now, I could say send note data of entire song if I had a whole bunch of other MIDI parts, which I don't in this case. I've only got the one. But if I had lots of others, then I can do send note data of selected tracks. So if I've got a whole bunch of different things in this song, I can use that. But I'm only going to use this one here, and I want to send to Notion on this computer, not Notion Mobile. And I want to merge this into an open document. Or I could create a lead sheet with it. But for right now, I just want to merge into an open document. And then I'm going to hit send. And this opens up a new Notion score. And I'm going to zoom in so that you can see it. Because what you will notice is it's brought the chords over from the chord track. Alright, let's go back to Studio One. See, we've got our chords here from the chord track. I go back to Notion. You'll see that the chords are there as well. As are all the voicings, it's selected the piano sound. Now we can double check that we've got the correct sound. We can go into score setup and just make sure that we've got basic and piano selected. Cool, which we do. And we can OK that. We can get out of the score setup and then we can play this. Alright, so there's just a very simple example of being able to send MIDI data from Studio One to Notion. You can, of course, send something back from Notion to Studio One. And the way you would do that is you go to File, and where is it? Send to Studio One. So I go Send to Studio One, and I've got a bunch of options here. I can send audio to Studio One, creating a new song with individual audio tracks. Or I can send the score to Studio One, creating instrument tracks, including notation. Or I can send bounced MIDI to Studio One, including controller information. So if I've got things like articulations, let's say I've done an electric guitar thing and I've got palm mutes and bends and all sorts in the score, then this is the one I want, because this is going to include all of that information. So then I'll just send MIDI. Now the cool thing about Studio One is it has Notion effectively built into it via the score editor. Okay, the score editor in Studio One is essentially Notion inside of Studio One. So all of that stuff will come across if you send the MIDI data. Okay, and you can send this to anything that's on this network. So I could send this to my Mac if I wanted to, but I'm going to use this computer. And in this particular case, I'm actually going to send the score to Studio One, including the instrument tracks, including notation. So let's send the score, and I should be able to open up Studio One. If I right click this, that should have opened up a new song. Oh, it didn't work. It didn't work. Unless it opened it up in a new track. No, it didn't work. Why did that not work? I'm a little confused by that. Try that again. Send Studio One. Send score to Studio One, creating instrument. Merge into open document. That's what I didn't do. So let's go and merge that into an open document. Now I should be able to come over here. Huh. What the heck? And nothing came across. Maybe it's too short. Maybe that's the problem. Maybe because it's only 4 bars it didn't go across. I'll have to try this with something a little bit longer, I think. But that clearly has not worked. But yeah, that's essentially how you would do it anyway. I don't know why that hasn't worked. That's odd. But there you go. These things happen. Let's see what else we have. Notation, reach your MIDI notes. Okay, yeah, okay, I've answered that question. I was thinking on a collab, you write a piece and send me the Notion sheet instead of a stem, and then I assign whatever instrument I would like to use. Oh, I think I see where you're going. Just curious if possible, so backup stem is perhaps corrupted on sending. Okay. Alright, so I think we've caught up. I think we have caught up. I'm just going back to see if there are any other questions. No. Okay. I don't see any more questions. But yeah, essentially, Studio One and Notion, they have this symbiotic thing where you can send to and from Studio One. And that's been around since Studio One 3.2. So it's been around a while. But before, you could only send just MIDI data to Studio One. You couldn't send anything else. You couldn't send score data. You could only send MIDI data. And then you would have to assign it sound. So, you know, if you had something fairly detailed in Notion, you then had to, when you sent the the MIDI data to Studio One, it would create a bunch of tracks, and they would be all there, but there'd be no assignment, so there'd be no sound, and you'd have to go and assign the sounds. But it's a little bit different now. Would MIDI file be easier? Yeah, probably sending MIDI from Notion might be easier for what you're wanting to do. Just to be sure. Let's see. Well, looks like Mike is going to do an after show party. Mike's after show parties are the stuff of legend, by the way, folks. They are hilarious fun. If you've never been to one before, I'm pretty sure Mike would be pretty happy to let you join. It's not a closed group, as far as I'm aware. So if you want to do that, I'm pretty sure Mike will drop a link at the end of the show into the chat so you can join. Any other questions, folks? Otherwise, we will wrap the show a little early. I like to try and make my shows an hour long, but especially since we started about 5 or 6 minutes late, I'd like to go the full time if at all possible. So, any other questions? I'm still trying to figure out why on earth I couldn't send from that Notion to Studio One. That doesn't make any sense. I don't understand why it would do that. Maybe if I go into Studio One and maybe if we send the score, maybe that would work. Let's go see. Okay, I'm going to close this song. Because something is not working. There's definitely stuff there. Yeah, alright, so that's definitely there. Maybe if we copy that lot and paste that here, maybe without that temporal information because we don't need it. Maybe we could try that. Maybe let's go send to Studio One. Send score. Says it's transferring, but no document is being created. That's weird. Now I've got this checked. Merge into an open document. All right, let's try sending audio this time. Uh-oh. It didn't like that. This appears to be broken, folks, because it's not creating a new document. Yeah, it looks like sending from Notion to Studio One may actually be broken. Because it ain't working. Alright, Charlie has asked he's asked a big question. Which I could probably take a whole show to unpack, but I'm just basically only going to take a few seconds on this, and I'm going to make my answer very, very short. And I'm going to direct you to some great resources on the subject. So Charlie's question is 432 versus 440 tuning. What's your take? So the way I see it is this: 440 hertz, A being equal to 440 hertz was not universal until almost the beginning, the early part of the 20th century. It's actually quite a new standard. There are various reasons for this. One of the reasons is for classical composers, classical musicians, and classical orchestras being able to play classical works. And when I say classical, I don't mean in the broadest sense, I mean in the specific classical period sense, being able to play Mozart's symphonies on period instruments. And by that I mean instruments that are made during the Mozartian period. So from the from around about the 1740s to about the 1790s. So during that 55, 56, 60-year period, instruments that were made at that point. Those are what we would call period instruments because they belong in the classical era. They were made during the classical era. Those instruments were not designed to tune to A being equal to 440. Depending upon where you were in Europe at the time, there were different tunings. There was 432, there was 415, there was 450, in fact. So there were different tunings around different parts of Europe that kind of were agreed upon. But here's the thing. As we have developed technologically with music and with how we allow music to be played by, a broader group of instruments, and how we now kind of merge different styles and musics from different cultures into Western music, and other cultures also, they draw in some Western music into their cultures as well. So, there's a lot of that going on. So something had to be agreed upon by which everybody could play in the same key for a start. And also everybody could play a cohesive sound and everything sound in tune in certain keys. Here's the thing with being in 432. And I'm speaking specifically to the science. I'm ignoring all the other stuff because all the other stuff, as far as I'm concerned, is irrelevant. I'm speaking strictly to the science here. There are some key signatures which do not sound good at 432. And there is a mathematical reason and a scientific reason why that is the case. And that is to do with the harmonic series. We've talked a little bit about harmonics, so it's kind of quite nice that we start the show with harmonics and we're finishing the show with the harmonic series from which you get harmonics. So the harmonic series is all of those overtones that make up the fundamental note that you hear. So when I play this note here, or if I play this note here, this is the A that we're talking about. This is 440 cycles per second. Okay? Now, if I just detuned that note to 432, to my ears it would sound quite a bit flat, because that's like just over a quarter tone flat. But I've not just changed the fundamental tone, I've changed the harmonic series of that note. I've detuned the harmonic series of that note, which is where the problem arises. Some key signatures, a major chord sounds definitely very major, like D major. For example, D major in 440 sounds beautiful and strident, right? If you detune the piano so that the whole piano is detuned by exactly the same amount, so that A equals 432 instead of 440, D major doesn't sound major anymore. It sounds somewhere between minor and major. So you could say it's D minor, but that's probably not a nice word to choose. Maybe I should have chosen a different one. But anyway, it's the only one that kind of came to mind. But yeah, it sounds between major and minor. Now here's the problem. Let's say I'm just doing this just on my piano. But then let's say I ask my friend to come and play a violin solo, and they tune to A equals 440, so they tune all of their strings with that tuning in mind. Tuning to 432. Now, they will find that when they play in certain other keys, it's not going to agree with my tuning. So let's take B flat, for example. B flat is kind of okay in 432. But on a violin, it's not okay at all. It's not even close. The gap between the intervals is not exact. It's not the same. So there inherently is a little bit of a problem. Now, a good violinist can compensate just by moving their fingers a little bit on the fingerboard. There's no frets, so they don't have to worry about that too terribly much. They just have to watch their intonation a little bit more. But the tone, the sound of the fundamental tone is going to be different because the harmonic series has been detuned. And so all the mathematics of those harmonics has been shifted a bit. And so it affects the tone of the sound, which is what a lot of people hear. So they will say that, 432 sounds, relaxing or peaceful or something like that. And that's quite commonly where the whole 432 thing comes from. It comes kind of from kind of new agey music and that kind of music. And I'm not going to be derogatory towards that kind of music because I know there's a lot of people who watch this channel who are involved in that kind of music. And so I'm not going to knock it and I'm not going to belittle it in any way. But suffice it to say that, they will say that 432 kind of sounds much more calming, peaceful, and all of that. What they are responding to is they are responding to the slight change, not just in the pitch, but in the timbre caused by the changes in the harmonic series. So I'm going to direct you to Adam Neely's video. He's done a couple of videos on 432. But his most recent video on 432, I think, is the best, most thorough video essay on the subject, and is very, very well worth watching because I think it will give you the clearest answer because he goes into some of these things in a little bit more depth than I can here. Is 432 tuning James Taylor the one that James Taylor uses? No, he does actually use 440. But what he does do is he has different tunings on his guitar. That's a different thing. Different tunings on a guitar is completely different. The fundamental agreement with 440 remains, but instead of tuning the guitar to standard E, A, D, G, B, G, B, E, which is the standard tunings of a 6-string acoustic guitar. Sometimes he'll play in open tuning, sometimes he'll play in drop D, where the E string is dropped down, or he'll play in dadgad, which is D-A-D, G-A-G. No, G-A-D. Dadgad. That's a different thing, but the fundamental agreement that A equals 440 remains in place in James Taylor's music. Let's see. Bob says, does Notion also pull out drum MIDI notes? If so, does the template change? It does deal with drum notation. However, there is a caveat with that. And that is that Notion only uses the general MIDI drum map, which I believe is kind of based on a 1980s Roland map that a lot of people use, a lot of notation programs accept. But however, not all of them do. For example, Easy Drummer has its own custom mapping. So if you were then to bring that into Notion to use the Notion drum set, then you're going to have to spend quite a bit of time remapping things. Now, if you have Studio One, then the trick here before you bring that into Notion is to bring that into Studio One first. So if you've got a drum part that's recorded in some other program, bring it into Studio One first and remap it using the score editor, because you can do that in the score editor. You can do all the remapping using the little track box on the left hand side of the score editor, and you can move things to where they need to be in the score. Then you can send it to Notion and it will be correct, and you'll have the hi-hat line where it should be, you'll have the snare drum line where it should be, and all of that in your drum part. So that will definitely work. Let's see. I find the whole thing fascinating. I tuned my guitar down to 430. It does sound different. Yes, it does. It really does. And that's because you've shifted the harmonic series. So all of those fundamental overtones of your strings and the way they sympathetically vibrate with each other will be different. You'll have a different tone. You'll have a different timbre altogether. You might even find that a bright sounding acoustic guitar might sound a little bit darker. I'm not suggesting that as a solution to making a bright sounding guitar sound darker, because you're going to encounter some of those problems that I talked about with playing in certain key signatures because of the changes of the harmonic series. It means that certain chords and certain keys will be out of tune with everything else, and there's no way to fix that, unfortunately. Is Notion included in Studio One Artist? No, it is not. There is no score editor in Studio One Artist. It is strictly a Studio One Professional feature. That's not to say you cannot send from Studio One to Notion using Studio One Artist. You can, but you can only send MIDI data back and forth. You cannot send score data back and forth. Let's see. It is included in Studio One Professional, and if you have PersonaSphere, you have Studio One Professional. Mike says, some folks talk about 432 being divisible by 8, and that 8 Hz has a special relationship to the human mind. I'm unsure about that, but I read it somewhere. Yeah, some of that is scientific, but a lot of it is pseudoscience. Unfortunately, a lot of that is pseudoscience. It's not really based on anything that is, clearly testable, verifiable using the scientific method. And there's no real peer-reviewed, psychoacoustic documents out there that are in agreement with that. But it's a good question. Let's see what else. Do we have anything else, or are we done? I think we're done. I think I have got to the end of all of the questions. So, Mike, if you are going to Zoom, please put your link in the chat, because we're going to wrap the show. So yeah, so thank you everybody for coming, and thank you for all of your great questions. There have been some absolute belters as usual. You guys are great at providing really good quality questions, and you've kept me on my toes, and you've actually helped me find a bug with Notion 6, the latest build. It does not seem to send to Studio One correctly, to Studio One 6 correctly. Which is fine. I can log that tomorrow internally, and I can get the developers onto that, because I have a hotline to the developers. One of the perks of the job. Alright folks, I will see you all on Wednesday for Songwriting Simplified with my good buddy Jonny Gibe. And we should be over on his channel, so if you're not subscribed over there, please go subscribe. It'd be great if we could get him up to 2,000 subscribers, and then it will really help him rebuild after having lost his channel that he spent like 12 years developing, and he's had to start all over again. So if you're not subscribed to his channel, please go over there and do that. He would appreciate it. I would appreciate it, because he's appreciating it, and so there'll be much mutual appreciation going around for everybody. So until then, folks, I will bid you a very good night. Good night.